Top 5 Best Reciprocating Saws. Number 5. DeWalt Atomic DCS369B. My table saw is a DeWalt. My favorite clamps are DeWalt. Most of the tools I used as a conveyor mechanic were DeWalt. I've been a fan of DeWalt tools for a long time, and I was excited to get my hands on the brand's one-handed reciprocating saw. Unfortunately, I was immediately disappointed. This saw simply didn't have the power to make it through our tests. It took forever to cut through anything even remotely strenuous, to the point that I almost gave up on the testing a few times. It took twice as long as the next slowest saw to make it through our nail-embedded wood and metal tests, and that was with me using my second hand. The only positive comment that I have is that it didn't vibrate that much. As I've said already, don't buy a one-handed reciprocating saw unless you know you need one. And if you do need one, then get the Cobalt. Coming in number 4. DeWalt DWE305. This DeWalt is a good middle-of-the-pack option. The grip on the saw is decent, but there's hardly any shock absorption when cutting. The saw had a middling turning radius during our plywood test, and it consistently performed near the bottom of the rankings during our time tests. It definitely cuts, but it just doesn't cut particularly well. There's some weirdness going on with the depth guard. It's not adjustable, but there's more to the story here. It's actually a steel piece attached to the end of the rubberized grip on the saw. It looks like DeWalt designed a reciprocating saw, but forgot to include a depth guard, so it cobbled one together from extra parts. The front grip is comfortable, but it narrows considerably near the nose of the saw, if you don't count that extra depth guard. The blade changing lever is made of plastic, so I question its long-term durability. It's an okay saw. If anything, it's pretty inexpensive. Pros: comfortable grip. Affordable. Cons: excessive vibration. Wide turning radius. Low power and speed. Coming in number 3. Cobalt KRS 1824B03. At 24 volts, the Cobalt KRS 1824B03 was the most powerful battery-operated saw we tested, at least on paper. It held its own against the Milwaukee fuel through most of the tests, and it even outperformed on a few. Overall, this saw was a beast. It performed near the top in all of our tasks, cutting easily and cleanly through everything we put in front of it. As a heavier-duty, more expensive saw, the Cobalt also has some nice bells and whistles, a built-in work light, an extendable shoe, a battery charge indicator, and even 2 different cutting modes. Though, frankly, I didn't notice a significant difference in performance between the 2 cutting modes. This is a workhorse that gets the job done. That said, there were a few issues with the Cobalt KRS 1824B03 that were enough to put it behind the Milwaukee. While it turned easily enough while cutting, it did have a much larger turning radius than some of the other saws, which could be limiting in some more precision cutting applications. It also vibrated a great deal, even for a reciprocating saw, enough to be uncomfortable to use after a while. The second hand grip, while it fit my hand well enough, seemed to be covered in loose, flimsy rubber that I could anticipate coming off relatively quickly. And, perhaps most detrimentally, it ruined several blades during our metal cutting test. If you're committed to the Cobalt line already, this is a quality product, but it just didn't perform quite as well as the Milwaukee. Pros: powerful speed. Multiple cutting options. Integrated work light. Cons: wide turning radius. Excessive vibration. Coming in number 2. Bosch RS428. Sometimes you need to cut through more than a bunch of 2x4s to get the job done. If a battery-powered saw isn't cutting it, you may want to consider a corded reciprocating saw. The Bosch RS428 14-amp corded is of the corded variety, and boy, does it deliver. This beast of a saw will happily destroy anything you put in front of it. The turning radius is especially impressive, and it turns on a dime, which is great for precision cutting. The Bosch RS428 itself is comfortable to hold, even for long periods of time, though I'd like to see more of a bump to rest on my hand between my thumb and pointer finger. My hand shimmied up the grip as I cut. Speaking of which, this saw did a great job with vibration control. There's even a lock on the variable speed trigger that keeps the saw on. This is great since demolition jobs can go for a long time, but I would hate to think what would happen if you had the trigger lock feature on and you lost control of it. There are a few drawbacks worth mentioning. The Bosch RS428's depth guard is a little finicky to move, and it's difficult to use the blade receptacle. You have to turn the black lock until it releases the blade and then hold it open while inserting a new one. Every other saw I tested had an easier way to change the blade. The Bosch RS428 also takes a second to rev up to speed. It's a short delay, but noticeable. Once it's going, it'll slice through just about anything fast. Pros: powerful speed, tight turning radius, low vibration. Cons: changing depth guard and blade is difficult. Slow to power on. Coming in number 1. Milwaukee 2720-21M18. The Milwaukee 2720-21M18 fuel sawzall was a standout. Not only does it come with the cordless reciprocating saw, battery, charger, reciprocating saw blades, and instruction manual, but it has a stud hanger as well. If you've ever been at the top of a ladder and needed to set down a sawzall, you know how important this feature is. With a rubberized pistol grip in the back and a second-hand grip on the front, it's really comfortable to hold. It needs to be comfortable because, during our endurance test, this saw outperformed every other saw in terms of the sheer number of cuts made, and it came in second in terms of cuts per amp hour of battery capacity. Whether that's a function of superior battery or superior cutting and this saw is a superior cutter, it's hard to tell. That said, I was able to lop the end off a 2x4 over 150 times before the battery gave out. As for downsides, it's worth mentioning that the levers that control the depth guard and blade changing mechanism are plastic. I'm not sure how these pieces will last in the long term. Also, the saw was a little hard to clean, as it was spitting out sawdust for days after our final test. And it was a bit rough on blades. During our metal cutting test, we swapped to a new blade after the third set of cuts. Not only did the Milwaukee fuel sawzall cut more 2x4 pieces, but it was also the most expensive saw on this list. However, we believe the price is offset by the included charger, battery, and hardshell case, and the fact that this saw features a brushless motor, which is more efficient, powerful, and longer lasting than typical brushed motors. If you expect to use a reciprocating saw for anything even remotely strenuous, you'll be hard-pressed to find a better quality tool. The Milwaukee fuel sawzall is the tool that I'll be picking up for my own personal use after testing. Pros: comfortable to hold, superior cutting power, long-lasting battery. Cons: blades don't last long, hard to clean, expensive.